They cut my hair while I slept, so I wouldn't outshine my sister. Hook? I woke with my hand already reaching for my hair. It was a habit I had carried for years. Whenever I slept somewhere unfamiliar or somewhere that made me feel like a child again, I touched the long auburn strands before opening my eyes. Their weight against my shoulder reminded me that I was still myself. That Friday morning, my fingers met jagged ends. I sat up so quickly that the room tilted. Loose strands covered the pillow. Some were only an inch long. Others reached my collarbone. My braid was gone. When I stumbled toward the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The hair I had grown and cared for more than a decade had been hacked away while I slept. One side had been cut close enough to expose my scalp. The other hung in uneven clumps. Thin red scratches marked the skin above my ear. In the bathroom, I found the rest of it stuffed into the trash beneath tissues and an empty toothpaste box. Downstairs, my parents were drinking coffee. My mother looked at my ruined hair and smiled. "Amanda deserves one day when she doesn't have to compete with you," she said. My father folded his newspaper. "Now, maybe people will feel sorry for you instead of staring at you." Amanda's wedding was the following afternoon. I was supposed to stand beside her as maid of honor. Instead, my parents had entered my bedroom while I was unconscious and put scissors against my head because my sister was afraid I might look too beautiful in photographs. They thought I would cry, put on a wig, and obey. They were wrong. Before I left that house, I photographed everything: the pillow, the scissors, the hair in the trash, and the cuts on my scalp. What none of them understood was that their plan had left behind a witness they could not control. By the end of Amanda's wedding, the woman they had spent years forcing into the shadows would finally stop protecting them from the truth. Part 1. The daughter who learned to disappear. People in my parents' neighborhood believed the Carters were the kind of family other families should imitate. My father, Edward Carter, sold insurance and coached youth baseball on weekends. He remembered every client's birthday and sent sympathy cards whenever someone lost a relative. My mother, Linda, worked as a school counselor. She gave presentations about confidence, emotional safety, and the importance of listening to children. No one who attended those presentations would have believed that she once called a summer arts program and declined my place without telling me, because the final exhibition fell on the same weekend as Amanda's graduation party. I had been 16. The program offered a partial scholarship and a chance to work with professional designers. I found the rejection letter in my mother's desk weeks later. When I confronted her, she did not apologize. "Your sister only graduates once," she said. "There will be other programs." There were other programs. There was only one moment when I understood that my future could be traded away whenever Amanda's feelings required it. Amanda was 3 years older than me. As children, we shared a bedroom with floral wallpaper and 2 narrow beds pushed against opposite walls. At night, we whispered until our mother told us to sleep. We built houses from cardboard boxes, dressed our dolls for imaginary weddings, and promised we would always be best friends. For a long time, I believed those promises. The change did not happen all at once. When Amanda was 8 and I was 5, our mother enrolled her in local beauty pageants. Amanda loved the dresses, the applause, and the way adults praised her for standing beneath bright lights without looking nervous. I wanted to be exactly like her. Years later, when I was 13, I entered a regional youth competition Amanda had entered twice without winning. I did not expect much. I was quiet, awkward, and terrified of speaking into a microphone. Then I won. I still remember standing beneath the stage lights with a sash across my chest while Amanda clapped from the wings. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes looked empty. That night, she turned toward the wall without saying goodnight. After that, every achievement became a problem that needed to be managed. If I earned the highest grade in a class, Amanda reminded everyone that she had taken a harder course at my age. If a relative complimented my drawings, my mother immediately praised Amanda's singing. If someone admired my hair, Amanda found a reason to leave the room. My parents called their response keeping the peace. When I received an academic award, my mother took Amanda shopping the following weekend because she did not want her to feel forgotten. When a teacher suggested I skip a grade, my father warned me that graduating close to Amanda might embarrass her. "You don't have to take every opportunity," he told me. "Sometimes being kind matters more." I turned the opportunity down. That became my role in the family. Amanda felt things intensely. I was expected to understand. Amanda needed reassurance. I was expected to provide it. Amanda deserved the spotlight. I was expected to step out of it. The first time my mother treated my body as something she could control, I was 15. I had spent a year growing out a bad haircut. The night before a family portrait, she announced that my hair looked untidy and needed trimming. I said no. She followed me into the bathroom with scissors. When I covered my hair with both hands, she called my father. He stood in the doorway and told me to stop embarrassing myself. My mother cut several inches from the front while I cried. The next morning, Amanda stood in the center of the family photograph. No one ever called what happened wrong. My father said I had made a simple haircut unnecessarily dramatic. Years later, I would remember that scene and wonder why I had believed adulthood would automatically protect me. By the time I left for college, I had become skilled at disappearing without physically leaving a room. I wore simple clothes to family events. I changed the subject when relatives asked about my work. I learned to receive praise with a shrug, as though anything good in my life had happened by accident. My long auburn hair was the one part of myself I refused to surrender. It had grown past my waist by the time I was in my mid-20s. Caring for it became a ritual, brushing it carefully each night, trimming the ends every few months, and tying it into a loose braid while I slept. It was not merely vanity. It represented patience, choice, ownership. It was something I had maintained for myself in a family where my choices were always treated as temporary. At 26, I worked as an interior designer in a city about 40 minutes from my parents' home. I had a modest apartment, a growing list of clients, and a boyfriend named Mark, who understood the difference between helping someone and surrendering to them. Mark was a photographer. He noticed details other people ignored: the moment my shoulders tightened when my mother called, the way I apologized after saying no, the exhaustion behind my smile whenever Amanda needed another favor. One evening, Amanda called while Mark and I were preparing dinner. She wanted me to drive to our parents' house to rearrange furniture before a party. "It has to be tonight," she said. I looked at the vegetables on the counter and the bottle of wine Mark had opened. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Amanda went silent. Then she sighed. "Never mind. I'll tell Mom you're too busy." Within 5 minutes, my mother called. "Your sister rarely asks you for anything," she said. That was not true. Amanda asked me for things constantly. But by the end of the call, I had grabbed my keys. Mark did not argue. He leaned against the kitchen counter and asked, "Do you ever notice that Amanda's emergencies happen whenever you have plans of your own?" I told him families required sacrifice. He asked, "Why are you always the sacrifice?" I did not have an answer. The truth was that I had spent so many years protecting the image of our family that I no longer knew how to examine it honestly. I told myself Amanda was insecure, not cruel. I told myself my parents were imperfect, not intentionally unfair. I told myself I was strong enough to absorb the imbalance. Then Amanda met David Miller. For the first time, her fear of being compared to me stopped being a private family problem. It became the foundation of everything that followed. Part 2. The man Amanda chose after he noticed me. I met David at a corporate reception held in an office tower my firm had recently redesigned. The company had hired us to transform an outdated executive floor filled with dark wood and narrow corridors. I had recommended glass partitions, warmer lighting, and several quiet spaces where employees could work without feeling watched. I attended the reception because my supervisor wanted someone available to explain the design choices. David approached me near a wall of windows overlooking the city. He was 32, with dark hair, blue eyes, and the polished confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms. He introduced himself as a financial analyst and asked why I had placed a reading area beside the busiest corridor. "Most designers would hide it somewhere quieter," he said. "That would defeat the purpose," I replied. "People only use quiet spaces if they don't have to disappear to find them." He smiled. So, you designed visibility without pressure. That was the idea. We spoke for nearly an hour. The conversation was easy, but it was not romantic. I had already been dating Mark for more than a year, and I mentioned him when David asked about the photography displayed in my apartment. David seemed genuinely interested in my work. He asked questions and waited for complete answers rather than using every pause to talk about himself. Then Amanda arrived. She had come with a friend who worked for the company. She crossed the room in a red dress, kissed my cheek, and immediately placed herself between David and me. "My sister never knows when she's giving a lecture," she said playfully. David laughed politely. I was the one asking questions. Amanda touched his arm. "Then you're braver than most." The shift happened so smoothly that I almost admired it. Within minutes, Amanda had redirected the conversation toward restaurants, travel, and an upcoming charity gala. I excused myself to speak with another client. As I walked away, David called after me. "Will you be at the opening next month?" I turned and said I probably would. Amanda looked from him to me. Her expression changed for less than a second, but I recognized it. It was the same look she had given me from the side of the stage when I won that childhood competition. When I glanced back later, Amanda and David were exchanging phone numbers. 6 months passed. Then Amanda invited our family to dinner at a restaurant near my parents' house. She spent the first half of the evening unusually quiet. After dessert, she placed her left hand on the table and revealed a diamond ring. David proposed. My mother gasped, even though Amanda later admitted she had told her 2 days earlier. My father ordered champagne. Amanda smiled while everyone congratulated her, but her eyes kept returning to me. She was watching for pain. I felt none. I liked David. I believed he was intelligent and decent, but my connection with him had lasted one conversation. My life was with Mark. I hugged Amanda and told her I was happy for her. She held me a little too tightly. "You don't think it's strange?" she whispered. "What?" "That he met you first. He met both of us at the same event. But he talked to you first." I pulled back. "Amanda, I'm with Mark." "I know." She smiled. "I was only asking." Later, my mother raised her glass. "To Amanda," she said. "Our shining star, who finally found a man worthy of her." No one mentioned my recent promotion. I told myself it was not the right evening. A week later, Amanda came to my apartment carrying a white box. Inside was a bottle of champagne and a card that read, "Will you stand beside me?" She asked me to be her maid of honor. For a moment, every difficult year between us seemed to soften. She said I understood her better than anyone. She said she wanted her sister beside her when she married the man she loved. I cried when I accepted. Mark opened the champagne and congratulated us. After Amanda left, he picked up the empty box and studied the card. "You're happy," he said. "I am. Then I'm happy for you." He set the box down. "Just remember that maid of honor doesn't mean unpaid wedding planner, emotional punching bag, or emergency servant." I laughed. "You make her sound terrible." "I'm not saying she's terrible. I'm saying you forget yourself when she needs something." I promised I would set boundaries. At first, it seemed possible. Amanda thanked me for every phone call and every idea. She asked about my schedule before arranging appointments. She even apologized for how competitive she had been when we were younger. "I think I always worried people preferred you," she admitted. I told her there had never been a competition from my side. She took my hand. "Maybe this wedding can be a fresh start." I believed her because I wanted to. What I did not understand was that Amanda's invitation had not placed me beside her as an equal. It had placed me close enough for her to monitor. Part 3. The wedding I was building for her. The wedding planning began with a binder. Amanda arrived at my apartment, carrying hundreds of printed photographs, color samples, and handwritten notes that contradicted one another. She wanted a romantic garden ceremony, but also modern black accents. She wanted soft lighting, dramatic flowers, rustic tables, and crystal chandeliers. I turned the chaos into a design. I created a consistent palette, drew a reception layout, and found ways to use the historic mansion's gardens without making the event feel crowded. Amanda loved the presentation. Then she began telling people she had designed everything herself. At first, I did not correct her. Brides were praised for their weddings all the time, even when professionals created every detail. But Amanda soon relied on me for more than design. I negotiated with the florist after she changed the flower order twice. I reorganized the guest list when it grew from just over 100 people to nearly 200. I hand-lettered place cards after Amanda decided printed ones looked impersonal. She called me during work meetings because the napkins looked too pink. She asked me to pay several small deposits when she reached her card limit and promised to reimburse me later. Mark watched the wedding take over our lives. One night, he found me asleep at the dining table with a paintbrush in my hand. "You have a client presentation tomorrow," he said. "I know. And you're painting signs at midnight. Amanda needs them by Saturday. Does Amanda know you need sleep?" I looked at the unfinished signs. "She's under pressure. So are you." I became defensive because his concern felt too close to an accusation I was not ready to hear. "She's my sister. And you are a person." The dress fitting should have been the moment I understood how little Amanda had changed. The bridal party gathered at a boutique with walls covered in mirrors. Amanda had chosen dusty rose for the bridesmaids. The first dress I tried was simple, with a fitted waist and a soft neckline. When I stepped out, the shop owner smiled. "That color was made for you," she said, "and the shape is perfect." Amanda's expression collapsed. Within seconds, she was crying. I knew this would happen. The room went silent. I asked what was wrong. "Everyone will be looking at you." "Amanda, it's a bridesmaid dress. You don't understand because you never have to try." My mother moved to her side. "This is Amanda's moment," she told me. "Could you choose something less fitted?" Less fitted quickly became less flattering. I ended up in a high-necked dress with a boxy waist and heavy sleeves. It made me look older and washed out my skin. Amanda brightened immediately. "That one is perfect." Jessica and Tara, two of Amanda's closest friends, exchanged a look. Neither said anything. Later, my mother pulled me aside. "Wear your hair up for the wedding," she said, "and keep your makeup natural." I always wear natural makeup. You know what I mean. I did. She meant less. At the bachelorette weekend, Amanda's attention shifted completely to my hair. We were preparing for dinner when she stood behind me and ran her fingers through it. "It really is beautiful," she said. The compliment felt like a warning. "Thank you. David remembers it." I turned. "What?" "He once said it was the first thing he noticed about you." My stomach tightened. "Why would you tell me that?" She shrugged. "I thought it was funny." "It doesn't sound funny." Amanda began brushing her own hair. "Would you ever cut yours?" "Not before the wedding." Her hand stopped. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to. It would grow back." "That isn't the point." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're selfish about the strangest things." That evening, I noticed a notification from the bridesmaids group chat. Amanda had written something that included the words Friday and deal with the hair. By the time I opened the conversation, the message had been deleted. Jessica sent a question mark. Tara replied, "That isn't funny." Amanda changed the subject to transportation. I did not ask what she had written. A few weeks later, I overheard Amanda speaking with our mother on a balcony outside the venue. "I don't understand why she won't cut it," Amanda said. "Just for one day." My mother replied, "Rachel has always liked being admired more than she admits. She'll walk into the ceremony and everyone will turn. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen." I stepped back before they saw me. The words frightened me, but not enough. I still believed there were lines my family would never cross. Then came the welcome dinner. One sentence from David's best friend turned Amanda's resentment into something much more dangerous. "Parfois?" The toast that changed everything. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Because the venue had another event on Friday evening, Amanda held a combined welcome dinner and informal rehearsal on Thursday night. That detail mattered later. It gave my family an entire day between the dinner and the wedding. At the time, I was grateful for it. I thought Friday would allow Amanda to rest. The dinner took place in a private room overlooking the river. I arrived early to adjust the seating plan after two relatives announced they were bringing unexpected guests. Amanda arrived in a white lace dress with David beside her. For the first hour, everything went well. People laughed. Wine was poured. David's family welcomed ours warmly. Then Ryan, David's best friend, stood to give a toast. He spoke about college, friendship, and the night David first mentioned Amanda. "I still remember the work reception," Ryan said. "David called me afterward and said, 'I met this beautiful woman tonight.'" Amanda smiled. Ryan continued. Then he said, "But did you see her sister?" The room went still. Ryan's smile disappeared the moment he realized what he had done. David reached for his sleeve. My mother looked at me as though I had spoken. Amanda stared at her glass. I stood before the silence became cruel. "What Ryan means," I said, "is that David met the Carter family that night and somehow survived long enough to marry into it." A few people laughed. I raised my glass. "What matters is that David saw Amanda clearly, loved her deeply, and chose to build a life with her. That is why we're here." The room relaxed. Everyone drank. For several minutes, I believed I had saved the evening. Then Amanda cornered me in the hallway. "You enjoyed that." I was trying to help. "You stood there like some graceful little saint while everyone imagined David wanted you. That was not what happened. He noticed you first. He spoke to me about my work. He remembered your hair." I lowered my voice. "Amanda, I have never wanted David. You never have to want anything. People give it to you." David appeared at the end of the hallway. "Amanda, what's going on? Ask Rachel." She walked away. David remained, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry about Ryan," he said. "You don't need to apologize. He should never have told that story." I wanted to end the conversation, but David continued. "I did notice you first. That part is true." I stared at him. He held up a hand. "I'm not saying that because I have feelings for you. I don't. I love Amanda. But I don't want you blamed for something I said before I knew either of you." Behind him, I saw movement. Amanda stood near the doorway. I could not tell how much she had heard. David turned and saw her. She walked away again. My mother found me in the restroom several minutes later. "You need to apologize." "For what?" "For humiliating your sister." Ryan told the story. "You were the subject of it." I laughed in disbelief. "What was I supposed to do?" "You could have stayed seated." The entire room was silent. "Then let David fix it." My father joined us near the exit. "Amanda is upset," he said. "You should do something about your appearance tomorrow. The wedding is Saturday. Then use Friday to find a wig." I looked at him. "You want me to wear a wig because David noticed me at a reception almost a year ago? It would show your sister you care." "No." The word came out before I could soften it. Both of my parents looked surprised. My mother's face hardened. "You have never understood what it costs Amanda to stand beside you. I have spent my whole life paying that cost." For once, I walked away before she could answer. I should have gone home with Mark. Instead, Amanda reminded me that several boxes of wedding materials were still at our parents' house. She said we needed to review them Friday morning. I agreed to sleep in my old room because it was late, and Mark had an early assignment. Before bed, I checked the bridesmaids group chat. A notification appeared from Amanda. Then it vanished. Jessica typed, "Amanda, don't." That message disappeared too. I considered asking what was happening. Then I decided I was too tired for another argument. I took one over-the-counter sleep tablet, placed my phone on the nightstand, and braided my hair. Sometime before dawn, I felt fingers near my scalp. I tried to move. My body felt heavy. A voice whispered, "Hold it higher." Another replied, "She'll wake up." I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard scissors close beside my ear. Part 5. What they took while I slept. Morning light was coming through the curtains when I opened my eyes. My head felt strangely light. I reached for my braid and found nothing. For several seconds, I could not understand what my fingers were touching. Then I saw the pillow. Auburn strands covered the white fabric. I stumbled toward the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked attacked. One side had been cut near my ear. The other hung in clumps at my neck. A section at the back was so short I could see skin beneath it. There were small scratches along my scalp. I began to cry. Not quietly. The sound came from somewhere deep inside me, from every year I had apologized for existing too brightly. Then, something changed. I stopped touching my hair. I picked up my phone. I photographed the mirror, the pillow, the floor, and the door. In the bathroom, I found the long sections of hair in the trash. I recorded a video before removing them. On my mother's dresser, half hidden beneath a scarf, lay a pair of large household scissors, with auburn strands caught near the hinge. I photographed those too. Then I placed the hair in a clean bag. Downstairs, my parents sat at the kitchen table. My mother looked at me and did not pretend to be surprised. "What did you do?" She sipped her coffee. "We knew you wouldn't agree if we asked. You cut my hair while I was sleeping." My father folded his newspaper. "It's hair. You entered my room and put scissors against my head while I was unconscious." "Don't be dramatic," he said. My mother's mouth curved slightly. "Amanda deserves one day when she doesn't have to compete with you." "I was never competing with her. Then this should not matter." I touched the scratch above my ear. "You hurt me." My father looked almost annoyed. "Now maybe someone will finally pity you instead of admiring you." The cruelty of that sentence was clarifying. For years, I had believed they loved me imperfectly. That morning, I understood they loved the version of me that surrendered. I took out my phone and messaged Amanda. "Did you know Mom and Dad planned to cut my hair while I slept?" Her reply came quickly. "I thought they were only going to shorten it." "You knew? You refused every reasonable compromise. You call this reasonable? Don't ruin my wedding over hair." I took screenshots. Then I called Mark. He arrived in less than half an hour. My father attempted to stop him at the door. "This is a family matter." Mark looked at my hair. "No, this is evidence." He came upstairs, saw the photographs, and helped me pack. As we carried my suitcase down, my mother said, "If you leave now, don't expect to stand beside your sister tomorrow." I turned. "You still think I care about being maid of honor?" Amanda called while we were driving away. I did not answer. At Mark's apartment, he contacted Sophie. She had been my closest friend since college and owned a small salon. When she arrived, she froze in the doorway. "Who did this?" "My parents." "For Amanda." Sophie closed her eyes for a moment. Then she took photographs from every angle. "This was not a haircut," she said. "Someone cut without protecting your scalp. These marks need to be documented." She wrote down what she observed before touching anything. Then she began repairing the damage. There was no way to preserve the length. She shaped the uneven sections into a textured pixie cut with clean lines around my face. The process took nearly 3 hours. At first, I could not look at the mirror. I watched the floor instead. Each piece that fell reminded me of a different version of myself: the teenager who learned not to celebrate, the college student whose mother opened her mail, the adult who still drove 40 minutes whenever Amanda said she needed something. Sophie worked carefully around the scratches. "You can grieve it," she said. "You don't have to pretend this is empowering yet." That sentence helped more than all the compliments I would later receive. I did not need to transform violation into inspiration immediately. I was allowed to be angry. I was allowed to miss what had been taken. When Sophie finally turned me toward the mirror, I saw my cheekbones, my eyes, and the line of my jaw without anything to hide behind. I did not feel beautiful yet, but I looked deliberate. Mark stood behind me. "They tried to make you look broken," he said. Sophie touched my shoulder. "They failed." That afternoon, we went to the police station. I almost turned around in the parking lot. A part of me still heard my father's voice, telling me it was only hair. I imagined an officer laughing or telling me to handle it privately. Mark did not push me toward the door. He said, "You decide." I sat there for several minutes. Then I looked at the bag, containing the hair my parents had thrown away. "I'm going in." The officer listened carefully. I brought the photographs, screenshots, and Sophie's written observations. I explained that I had voluntarily taken a sleep aid, that no one had drugged me, and that I had heard 2 voices while half conscious. The officer told me the precise legal classification would depend on the investigation and the laws of the state, but unwanted physical contact causing injury was not erased because the people responsible were relatives. He created a formal report. He advised me to preserve the original files, avoid editing the photographs, and save every future communication. I was not promising to pursue the harshest possible action. I was creating a record before my parents had time to rewrite the story. As we left, my phone vibrated. Jessica had sent a message. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I should have stopped it." Before I could reply, the message disappeared. I called her. She did not answer. I sent one question. "What did you know?" The message showed as read. No response came. That was the moment I understood something more existed. My parents had cut my hair. Amanda had known. But Jessica's fear suggested the plan had left a trail. Par 6. I stopped preparing to hide. That evening, I told Mark I was not going to the wedding. He did not challenge me. He brought food, turned off his phone, and sat beside me while I tried to imagine Saturday passing without me. For an hour, staying away felt like freedom. Then Amanda posted a message in the bridesmaids group chat. "Rachel has decided she cannot support me. Jessica will take over as maid of honor." There was no mention of my hair. No mention of our parents. No mention that Amanda had known what they intended to do. Within an hour, relatives began messaging me. "Are you sick? Did you and Amanda argue? Your mother says you are having an emotional episode." One aunt wrote that Amanda was devastated by my jealousy. Another asked whether I had always resented David. I understood what would happen if I disappeared. Amanda would tell the story first. By Saturday morning, my family would have decided I was unstable, jealous, and determined to destroy her wedding. "I'm going," I told Mark. "As a guest?" "Yes." "On your terms?" "Yes." For the first time in my life, those words felt possible. I did not need to buy a new outfit. Months earlier, I had purchased a sapphire blue tuxedo for a design awards dinner. It had a fitted jacket, satin lapels, and wide-legged trousers. I had almost returned it because my mother said the color made me too noticeable. Sophie brought it from my apartment. She adjusted the styling, replaced the blouse with a softer silk top, and chose small earrings that did not compete with the suit. The blue made my skin look warmer and turned my green eyes brighter. It was elegant without being bridal. I did not choose it to punish Amanda. I chose it because I was finished dressing like an apology. Then I called Carol Miller, David's mother. I had met her several times. She was direct, calm, and respected privacy. "I need to tell you something before tomorrow," I said. I explained only what I could prove. My parents had cut my hair while I slept. They had admitted entering my room. Amanda had known some version of the plan. I had photographs, messages, and a police report. Carol remained silent for several seconds. "Does David know?" "No. He needs to. I'm not calling to make him cancel the wedding. I understand. I'm calling because Amanda will tell him I did this to myself." Carol's voice softened. "I believe you." Those 3 words nearly undid me. She promised to speak with David privately. Later that afternoon, the wedding coordinator called. The lead photographer's assistant had become ill. She knew Mark worked in photography and asked whether he could recommend someone. Mark suggested Jason, a friend who had originally offered Amanda a quote before she hired a larger studio. The lead photographer approved him as a replacement. The venue added his name to the vendor list. Amanda agreed because she was desperate to avoid losing coverage. That decision gave Jason legitimate access to the reception and the spaces surrounding the bridal suite. He did not attend as a spy. He attended as a professional who understood why every file needed to be backed up. I also wrote Amanda a letter. At first, the words were angry. Then I started again. I wrote about the years I had hidden my achievements, changed clothes, and surrendered opportunities to keep her comfortable. I told her I had never wanted David. I told her my existence was not an attack. I told her insecurity might explain cruelty, but it could not excuse it. I ended with one sentence: "I am your sister, not the shadow you are entitled to shape." I sealed the letter. My phone rang. Jessica. She sounded as though she had been crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "What did you know?" "Amanda said things in the group chat." "What things?" I thought she was venting. Did she say my parents would cut my hair? Jessica stopped breathing for a moment. Jessica, I can't do this over the phone. Then meet me. I can't. Why? She says you're trying to destroy her wedding. I woke up with my hair in a trash can. I know. Then tell me the truth. Jessica whispered. Don't let Amanda delete anything else. The call ended. I stared at the screen. She had not answered my question, but she had not denied it either. I texted Amanda. I will attend tomorrow as a guest. I will not wear a wig. I will not lie about what happened. If you do not want me in the bridal party, I will accept that. Her response came several minutes later. Wear the wig or stay home. I replied once. No. The next morning, I dressed in sapphire blue and touched the short layers around my face. The woman in the mirror looked unfamiliar. For the first time, unfamiliar did not mean weak. Part 7. The wedding went on, but the trust was gone. The historic mansion looked almost unreal in the morning light. White chairs lined the lawn. Ivy climbed the stone walls. Staff carried flowers through open doors, while musicians tested their instruments beneath the trees. Mark drove. During the entire journey, I expected fear to stop me. It never did. The wedding coordinator met me near the service entrance. She looked at my hair and opened her mouth, but professionalism won. The florist brought cream roses instead of blush, she said. Amanda is threatening to send everything back. I looked at the arrangements and suggested moving the darkest roses from the reception tables to the ceremony arch. The adjustment took less than 10 minutes. You saved us again, the coordinator said. Only this once. Guests began arriving. Some complimented my hair without knowing what had happened. Others had heard a version from my mother and watched me cautiously. Jessica found me near the garden doors. Her eyes went immediately to my pixie cut. Oh, Rachel. I waited for her to say more. She looked toward the bridal suite. I'm sorry. For what? Amanda called her name from inside. Jessica flinched. Then, she walked away. Amanda emerged with my parents behind her. She wore a silk robe over her wedding gown. Her makeup was flawless. Her expression was not. What are you wearing? A suit. It's bright blue. It isn't white. Where is the wig? I told you I wasn't wearing one. My mother stepped forward. This is selfish. I looked at her. You cut my hair while I slept. Several nearby staff members stopped moving. My father lowered his voice. Do not start. I'm not starting anything. I'm answering her question. Amanda's hands began to shake. You're not my maid of honor. I understand. Jessica will stand beside me. Jessica looked sick. I handed the wedding coordinator the folder containing schedules and vendor contacts. Everything is updated. Amanda stared at me, waiting for a protest. I gave her none. Carol approached from the terrace. I think Rachel looks elegant, she said. My mother's jaw tightened. This is a private family matter. Carol replied. Not when it concerns the woman my son is about to marry. David appeared behind her. He looked at my hair, then at Amanda. My mother told me what happened. Amanda began crying immediately. Your parents cut her hair? They misunderstood. Did you know? I knew Mom was going to talk to her. That is not what Rachel's message says. Amanda looked at me. I had shown Carol the screenshots. She had shown them to David. She's twisting it, Amanda said. I thought they might persuade her to shorten it. Rachel had refused everything. David asked to speak with Amanda privately. Carol joined them in a sitting room near the bridal suite. I remained outside with Mark. Nearly 15 minutes later, David asked me to come inside. Amanda was holding her phone. I want you to see what my mother wrote, she said. She showed David and me a screenshot from a conversation with Linda. The visible messages read, Leave this to us. You don't need to know what we decide. Amanda said, I complained. I admit that. I told Mom I was afraid Rachel would draw attention. But I did not ask anyone to cut her hair. Mom told me to stay out of it. The screenshot appeared to support her story. There was no date visible above the first message. No earlier part of the conversation. I asked Amanda to scroll upward. She pulled the phone away. These are the relevant messages. David noticed. Why won't you show the rest? Because the rest is me crying about the wedding. It has nothing to do with this. Then show me. I deleted some of it. I looked at David. I can prove she knew something. I cannot yet prove exactly what she asked them to do. That was the truth. David's face looked pale. He turned toward Amanda. Did you know they would wait until Rachel was asleep? No. Did you know they would use scissors? No. Did you tell them Rachel had taken a sleep tablet? Amanda's eyes widened. No. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. But suspicion was not evidence. Outside, nearly 200 guests were taking their seats. The officiant was waiting. David paced toward the window. I don't know what to do. I had imagined hating him if he continued the wedding. Standing there, I saw a man being forced to evaluate the person he loved within minutes, with incomplete evidence and a carefully selected message suggesting her parents had acted beyond her instructions. He looked at me. What would you do? I would not ask the person your fiancé harmed to decide whether you should marry her. He closed his eyes. Then he nodded. He told Amanda that proceeding with the ceremony did not mean he believed the issue was resolved. He told her she would have to provide the complete conversation afterward. Amanda promised she had told him everything important. David continued with the wedding because he believed there was still a possibility that Amanda had complained cruelly while my parents independently crossed the line. I sat beside Mark in the third row. Jessica stood where I had been meant to stand. During the vows, David hesitated before saying Amanda's name. Amanda looked at me once. Then she looked at Jessica. After the ceremony, guests moved into the reception hall. The coordinator removed my maid of honor toast from the schedule. I was relieved. Before dinner, David approached me. You built most of this wedding, he said. Would you still say a few words? Amanda heard him. Her expression warned me to refuse. For most of my life, that would have been enough. I stood when the speeches began. I kept it brief. Marriage should be the one place where neither person has to become smaller for the other to feel secure. Love is not ownership. It is the courage to tell the truth, especially when the truth makes us uncomfortable. I raised my glass, to honesty and respect. Some guests applauded. Amanda did not. Later, during the bouquet toss, she turned halfway and looked directly at me before throwing. The bouquet came hard toward my chest. I caught it. A little girl beside her mother watched with wide eyes. I placed the flowers in her hands. The child squealed. People laughed and applauded. Amanda's face changed. She walked toward me. You're doing this on purpose. Doing what? Making everyone love you. I gave flowers to a child. This was supposed to be my day. It still is. No. You arrived dressed like that, with that haircut and that tragic story. You created the story. She raised her voice. None of this would have happened if you had agreed to look less noticeable. The room around us quieted. Jason stood several yards away with his camera raised. Amanda saw him and stopped. David had heard everything. So, that was the problem? He asked. How noticeable she looked. Amanda turned. That isn't what I meant. Jessica stepped away from the head table. Her hands were trembling. She walked toward David, holding her phone. Amanda, she said. Tell him now. Amanda went still. Jessica unlocked the screen. Tell him, she repeated. Or I will. Part 8. The message she thought she deleted. David led us back into the sitting room. Carol followed. Mark stood beside me. The wedding coordinator closed the door to keep guests from entering. Jessica remained near the center of the room, with her phone clutched in both hands. Amanda spoke first. She's trying to ruin everything. Jessica looked at her. No, I'm trying to stop lying. What do you have? David asked. Jessica opened a folder containing screenshots and a screen recording. 3 weeks before the wedding, Amanda had written in the private bridesmaids group chat. Rachel still refuses to cut her hair. Tara had replied. Then stop asking her. Amanda wrote. Mom says they can deal with it after the welcome dinner. She'll be sleeping at the house. Jessica had responded. What does deal with it mean? Amanda answered. By Saturday, she'll either wear the wig or stay home. Either way, no one will be looking at her. Tara wrote. Amanda, that is not funny. The messages disappeared from the chat shortly afterward. Jessica had taken screenshots because the conversation frightened her. Then she played the screen recording. The original exchange appeared with timestamps. A voice message from Amanda sat between the written messages. Jessica pressed play. Amanda's voice filled the room. Mom knows Rachel takes one of those sleep tablets when she's stressed. She and Dad can handle it after the dinner. I don't care how short they make it. If Rachel refuses the wig afterward, she won't be in the wedding. No one moved. The recording continued. Jessica's voice responded. You cannot be serious. Amanda sent another voice message. She has made everything about herself since we were children. For one day, I want people to see me first. My stomach turned. David stared at Amanda. You told me you did not know they would wait until she was asleep. I was angry. You told me you did not mention the sleep tablet. I didn't think they would actually do it. You said you did not care how short they made it. I was venting. Jessica opened another screenshot. The following morning, Amanda had messaged her privately. Did they do it? Jessica had replied. Do what? Amanda. Check Rachel when you see her. Mom isn't answering. A later message read. If she shows up with the shortcut, do not make a big deal. She feeds on attention. Jessica began to cry. I should have warned you, she said to me. I thought she was threatening something stupid. I did not believe your parents would actually go into your room. Then I saw your hair this morning, and knew. Why didn't you say something before the ceremony? Mark asked. Jessica wiped her face. Amanda told me Rachel had filed a false police report. She said if I showed anyone the messages, she would tell everyone I helped plan it because I was in the chat. Amanda shouted. You were in the chat. I told you to stop. You said nothing to Rachel. I was a coward. The honesty in Jessica's voice made Amanda look worse than any accusation could have. David turned to Amanda's phone. The screenshot you showed me before the ceremony. Amanda said nothing. Show me the full conversation with your mother. I deleted it. Jessica shook her head. You forwarded part of it to the group. She opened another screenshot. The complete exchange began with Amanda writing to Linda. Rachel took her tablet. Her door should be unlocked. Do it tonight because Mark is picking her up in the morning. Linda replied. Are you sure? Amanda. Yes. Make it short enough that the wig is her only option. Only after those messages had Linda written. Leave this to us. You don't need to know what we decide. Amanda had shown David only the final 2 lines. She had cropped out her own instructions. The room became silent again. David compared the screenshot Amanda had presented before the ceremony with Jessica's copy. The timestamps matched. The visible wording matched. Amanda had not fabricated a message. She had done something more calculated. She had selected the part that made her look innocent and hidden everything that proved she was not. You used that screenshot to make me marry you, David said. Amanda reached for him. No, I was afraid. You stood in this room before the ceremony and lied to my face. I love you. You did not give me the truth required to choose you. My mother entered without knocking. My father was behind her. What is this? She demanded. David held up Jessica's phone. Did Amanda tell you to cut Rachel's hair? My mother's eyes moved from the screen to Amanda. She was distraught. That is not an answer. She asked us to help. Amanda stared at her. Mom. What? We were protecting you. My father stepped forward. This has gone far enough. Rachel's hair looks fine. Better, actually. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because after everything, he still believed the outcome erased the violation. You cut me while I was unconscious. You had a scratch. You used my body to solve Amanda's insecurity. My mother said, a sister should be willing to make sacrifices. I made sacrifices for most of my life. Do not exaggerate. For once, I'm not. David turned to Amanda. I married you because you promised me honesty. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting a meeting. You planned an assault, waited until the evidence was incomplete, and then cropped a conversation to control my decision. Amanda's face crumpled. I thought you would leave. You should have told me the truth and allowed me to decide. We are married now. I know. Then you cannot walk away. I can leave tonight. I can speak to a lawyer. And I can refuse to begin a marriage with someone who manipulated me into the ceremony. Amanda grabbed his sleeve. This is our wedding night. David removed her hand. It should not have begun with a crime and a lie. Carol asked the coordinator to end the reception early without explaining private details to the guests. Amanda ran from the room. The doors opened into the reception hall. People turned toward her. She pointed at me. You stole everything from me. I stood near the doorway. I never wanted anything that belonged to you. You wanted David. No. You wanted my wedding. No. Then why are you here? That question contained the entire history of our family. Amanda believed my presence required justification. I reached into my bag and took out the letter. I came because you are my sister. She stared at the envelope. I wrote this before I knew what Jessica had saved. I handed it to her. It explains what happens next. What happens next? I stopped disappearing for you. She tore the envelope open, but did not read it immediately. My parents stood behind her. My mother said, "You are destroying this family." "No," I replied. "I am refusing to protect the people who destroyed it." Jason approached the coordinator and confirmed that the files from the reception had already been backed up. He did not post them. He did not threaten Amanda. He simply preserved what his camera had recorded. Mark took my hand. We walked through the reception hall together. No one applauded. I was grateful. This was not a performance. Guests stepped aside. Some looked confused. Others had heard enough to understand. Outside, the evening air felt cool against my scalp. For years, I had imagined freedom as something my family might eventually give me if I behaved well enough. That night, I learned freedom was something I had to claim without their permission. Behind us, the music stopped. Amanda had called me a thief. The only thing I took from her wedding was my life back. Ending. What happened? After the music stopped, the consequences did not arrive all at once. Real life rarely moves as quickly as stories make it seem. The police investigation lasted several months. At first, my parents claimed I had cut my own hair to embarrass Amanda. That explanation weakened when officers reviewed the photographs, the scissors, the hair recovered from their bathroom, and the messages connecting the plan to my stay at their house. Jessica provided the screen recording voluntarily. Sophie confirmed the condition of my scalp and the way the hair had been cut. Jason provided only the relevant portion of his recording through the proper process, rather than releasing it publicly. My mother eventually admitted that she and my father entered my room after Amanda confirmed I had taken a sleep tablet. My parents accepted a negotiated resolution involving a misdemeanor, assault-related charge, restitution for my medical and professional expenses, mandatory counseling, and a no-contact condition. I chose not to pursue a long civil lawsuit. That was not forgiveness. It was a decision not to spend years attaching my future to their actions. Their reputations suffered because they continued defending what they had done. My mother was placed on administrative leave while her employer reviewed the matter. She later returned in a reduced role. Several of my father's longtime clients quietly moved their policies elsewhere. I did not call their employers. I did not contact their clients. They experienced the consequences of their own explanations. David did not go on the honeymoon. He stayed with his parents and asked Amanda to begin individual therapy before they discussed whether anything remained to save. For several months, Amanda insisted the voice messages made her sound crueler than she had intended. She said she never believed our parents would follow her instructions exactly. David eventually filed to end the marriage. He contacted me only once. His message said, "I should have postponed the ceremony until I had the whole truth. I am sorry I allowed pressure and incomplete evidence to make the decision for me." I replied that I hoped he learned from it. That was all. This had never been a story about a man choosing between two sisters. It was about what happens when jealousy becomes entitlement and an entire family treats one daughter's autonomy as a reasonable price for another daughter's comfort. A guest had recorded part of Amanda's public outburst and posted a short clip online. It circulated through my parents' community. Several weeks later, a local journalist contacted me about an article on family boundaries and bodily autonomy. I agreed to speak only if the story did not identify our town or turn my haircut into entertainment. The article focused on control, favoritism, and the danger of excusing abuse because it comes from relatives. It did not transform me into a public figure. It did not repair what happened. It simply placed words around an experience I had spent years minimizing. Amanda wrote to me, almost 9 months after the wedding. The letter was different from her first attempts to contact me. She did not say the situation had merely gone too far. She wrote, "I asked them to do it. I chose the night. I told them about your tablet. I cropped the conversation because I knew David would not marry me if he saw the truth. I wanted you to feel small, because I felt small whenever you entered a room. I understand now that you were not doing that to me. I was doing it to myself." I read the letter twice. Then I placed it in a drawer. I replied with 3 sentences. I believe people can change. I also believe change takes longer than an apology. Do not contact me again until you can respect that. My life did not become perfect. Some mornings, I still woke with my hand reaching for hair that was no longer there. Crowded family events made my chest tighten. The sound of scissors close to my ear could send me back to that bedroom before I had time to stop it. I began therapy, not because my family had been correct about me being overly emotional, but because what they did deserved to be treated as real. I returned to work and completed a public library project built around natural light, open gathering spaces, and quiet corners where no one had to disappear to feel safe. The project did well. My career continued steadily, rather than transforming overnight. Mark and I moved into an apartment with wide windows and enough room for both his photography and my design samples. About a year after the wedding, he proposed on our balcony. There were no cameras, no audience, and no relatives waiting to turn the moment into a competition. I said yes. By then, my hair had grown into a short bob. I could have grown it long again. Maybe one day I would. But I no longer needed it to prove I was still myself. My parents had believed my strength was something visible they could remove with scissors. Amanda had believed dimming me would make her brighter. They were both wrong. The strongest part of me had never been my hair. It was the part that finally learned love does not require surrender, family does not erase consent, and peace purchased with silence is not peace at all. They cut away the thing they believed, made me powerful. What walked out of that wedding was the woman who finally understood that her power had always been her own.